The 366th edition of the Four Corners Podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners Podcast.
And that could make a difference. Lawson at the buzzer. Got it! Maybe not. Ty Lawson wins it at the buzzer.
Deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Gets the roll. Here we go. Page has it. Carolina down one. 84-83. Page into the front court with 4 seconds. Page to the rim. Got it! He got it! 9/10 of a second to go. Inbounds. Washington gets it to Warren. His full court shot. No good. Marcus Page baby. Does it for the Tar Heels. Carolina wins it.
Don't force it if you're Goss.
Comes in. Blocked by Meeks. Buried up ahead to Jackson. And he tucks it down for the 5-point lead. Matthews off the mark. And this year the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time. Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another live edition of the Four Corners Podcast, hanging out with you on a Sunday night. A little under 12 hours since we spoke with you this morning when we previewed Selection Sunday, and just a little over an hour or so ago, the full 68-team bracket was unveiled for the 2024 NCAA Tournament, and North Carolina, the Tar Heels, earn a number one seed as I expected them to do. Anthony did think they would be a 2 seed in the bracket, but the committee did the right thing, and they put the team that had earned the right to be a number one seed on the one line. And we're here to talk about that here tonight. In years past, we have done Selection Sunday, and then we've come back and broken down the bracket. And that's going to be the case tonight. We'll talk about Carolina getting the 1 seed. Talk about, do we like being a 1 seed now that we got our draw when we see how the bracket unveils? And then we'll come back tomorrow night and look at the West region, the West bracket in its totality. Then, of course, we'll be back. It'll be Wednesday when we preview Carolina's first-round matchup, which will be in Charlotte Thursday. The tip time is yet to be announced. But we'll do what we do in every edition of the pod. We'll start with our pod thought of the day, and we go to a classic one from former head basketball coach at Carolina, Roy Williams, with that thought being, quote, "The man on top of the mountain did not fall there." And look, Carolina, we're hoping they're about to start mountain climbing their way to a national championship, to a Final Four. And with that, they've got to earn and deserve to be there by the way that they play. It's not going to be handed to them. They've got to go out and take what's theirs. And I think Jay Billis said it pretty good on the ESPN's bracketology show. When they play with that defensive edge that we've seen them play with the majority of the season, this is a Final Four team. This is a team that can get to Phoenix and compete for a national championship. If they don't, they're not like teams in years past that were so offensively gifted that they could outscore the opponent and beat you no matter, the circumstance. So, I thought this was an appropriate pod thought to get us ready for the NCAA tournament because we want to be on top of the mountain. But as we've kind of grown to love with this team, it's not going to be handed to us, and we think we got a team that's ready to go out and put together the most important six-game winning streak of the season.
Yeah, and I mean, look, the other night was, a moment where you kind of saw some of the things that we were concerned about mid-season for this team. In terms of their effort defensively, just, not being nearly as ready as the team on the other side. And the thing is that you're hoping that was the wake-up call that this team needed, the last one that this team needed to realize that, look, when you get into this NCAA tournament, you need to bring it, and more than any other year, because, look, you got to bring it from game one. It used to be in the past, hey, if you were a 1 seed, man, you had a hell of a shot to potentially walk through your first game, even the second game. There were times where you could get away. I mean, Carolina's had a few occurrences where they did not play their best game in the second game of the tournament, and they found a way to advance. With where college basketball is at now, that is far from a guarantee. You need to be ready to go whenever you take the court in Charlotte to play either Wagner or Howard, and you got to be ready for whoever you're going to face between Mississippi State and Michigan State. That's the thing, man. It's going to start there. And then, from then on, it's only going to get more and more difficult for this team. So, I mean, look, they're capable of doing it. I think we've talked about it. The fact that the last 4 times Carolina has won a national championship, they didn't win the ACC tournament. They used a little bit of extra motivation from that ACC whenever they were eliminated from the ACC tournament to sort of springboard them. We said it going in. It was going to be incredibly difficult to win 15 straight games to close the season and win a national championship, which is what you would have had to do if you won the ACC tournament final. You don't have to worry about that. Now, that win streak, you have to start a new one right here. And hopefully that loss, especially with it being to NC State, a team that Carolina hates as much as anybody else in the country, right there alongside Duke, maybe that's what fuels this team and allows them to go on a magical run to cut down the nets for the 8th time in program history and the first time under Hubert Davis.
Yep, that's certainly the goal. And it all starts on Thursday when Carolina, as we mentioned, the number 1 seed in the West, the 4th overall seed in the tournament. We knew that was going to be the case, that they were not going to be the number 3 overall seed, the number 2, the number 1. When they put themselves in position to be a number 1 seed, they were going to be the 4th number 1 seed. They'll get the winner of Howard or Wagner, as we mentioned, on Thursday. This is the 18th time that Carolina is a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. That is by far the most in the history of the event. Their record as a 1 seed in the event, 63-12. So that's a pretty healthy record there for Carolina being a 1 seed. They've won quite a bit of games, despite usually when they've been a 1 seed being the number 1 overall seed, and usually a team that was expected to make the Final Four and win a national championship. Their last 5 NCAA titles came as 1 seeds: 1982, 1993, 2005, 2009, and 2017. If you're scratching your head and wondering, what about 1957? They were undefeated and they won a national championship. Seeding didn't become a thing until 1979. That was the first time that they started seeding the field. And that was, of course, the year where you had the Larry Bird, Magic Johnson final.
And let's just say, if there was seeding in 1957, they would have been a 1 seed. They were undefeated.
Exactly. Carolina has officially made their 53rd NCAA tournament. That's the second most in the country, behind Kentucky, who's made the tournament 61 times. Carolina has won 131 tournament games. That's the most in tournament history. And they've played in 180 tournament games. That's the second most, behind Kentucky, who's played in 184. Carolina's winning percentage in the NCAA tournament is 73%. That's the second best in the history of the event. They've made 21 Final Fours. As we all know, that by far is the most in the history of the NCAA tournament. And their 6 NCAA titles are the third most in the country, behind UCLA's 11 Kentucky has 8. But, of course, Carolina does have 7 overall national titles with the retroactive 1924 championship, which was handed out to them by the Helms Foundation in the late 1930s. So, when you look at that and you look at all those numbers and you look at the history and the success of the track and then the track record of success with the 1 seed, I think it's why I was still very optimistic about where this team was and is going into the field, because Carolina's been a 1 seed the most of anybody. And you look at the numbers, they've performed very, very well. And, of course, we've seen 2 number 1s be upset in the last 5 years, Virginia in 2018, Purdue, of course, last year losing to FDU. And there might be people that are starting to pick that because it's starting to happen a little bit more frequently. But I think that would be foolish, because if you look up and down the lineage of Carolina's experience in the tournament as a 1 seed, it's still fair to expect big things from this team, despite last night's disappointing loss to NC State in the tournament final.
Yeah, and I mean, look, if you're picking that upset, and we've seen it before, that's not the first time. In the 2015-16 season, when we got to the tournament, Florida Gulf Coast was Carolina's first round opponent. Seth Davis picked them to beat Carolina. And look, I don't think that, and look, maybe I'm taking Howard and Wagner too lightly. I don't really know if going in, Tar Heel fans should be overly concerned. Now, again, you got to bring it every single game, because, the 2 teams that you brought up, they were beaten by 16 seeds that were just more hungry than them. And that Wagner, Howard, especially a team like Howard, who's been there, this will be a second straight year. They're going to be, hoping to do something and pull off an upset. And last year's, win by Fairleigh Dickinson, I think probably has a lot of people inspired. That's one that I think a lot of people are going to look back on and say, if you start seeing more 16 seeds start to pull upsets, that'll be the upset that'll really sort of springboard a run on those types of things. But I don't, in terms of Carolina, I think you should be confident about that one. I think you should be fairly confident about this team making it out of the first weekend. Because I think people are going to probably overreact to how they played against NC State. And again, don't get it wrong. There were some things there that were concerning. That Hubert Davis, he brought up in the press conference that he did not like the fact at all that Carolina's effort level just wasn't where it needed to be on the defensive end of the floor. And that's not something you want to hear at this time of year. But I trust him. I trust this group of kids to respond to that. Because every time that we've thought to ourselves, and I'm one that has to own it as well. Middle of the season, I was wondering, especially after that Clemson loss, where was Carolina at? Would they be able to sort of stabilize themselves? And they did. They got things turned back in the right direction. And in the right direction means getting themselves, in the spot they were in to win the ACC regular season title. So I think this team, they're going to be motivated, because this is the other thing. You see all of these people predicting the brackets, and it's early. There might be people that, when it's all said and done, that's not what they end up going with. But typically, the experts that do it on TV, a lot of people follow in those same directions. And there's a lot of people that think that Arizona is going to come out of this part of the bracket. There's a lot of people that feel like Carolina is the most vulnerable 1 seed. And you can't tell me that these guys are not hearing that and are not going to be using that as motivation. And as we know, this team, more than just about any team that Carolina has had in a while, maybe they're not as dominant as, some of the teams that we've seen in years past, In terms of using things for motivation, it seems like this team is right up there with teams like the 2017 team, which used the motivation of the loss in the national title game the year before. The 2009 team, who used the loss in the Final Four the year before. This team feels like there's a lot of motivation there from what happened last year, and for the veteran guys that came in out of the transfer portal to come in and finally do something significant in the NCAA tournament in their careers. So I think Carolina's set up pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll reference what Hubert Davis said last week after the win at Duke to clinch the outright ACC title. He said that's why RJ came back. That's why Armando came back. And on the surface, he's absolutely correct. They came back to win an ACC regular season title. Ultimately, they came back to get back to the Final Four and have the chance to win a national championship and hang a banner. And that journey starts on Thursday. It starts on Thursday in Charlotte, in Spectrum Center. That's where Carolina will play. And like the last time Carolina was in Charlotte for the NCAA tournament, they won their first round matchup, lost in the second round. But again, historically, when Carolina is in the state of North Carolina for the NCAA tournament, for the first and second round, it usually means they're playing into the second weekend and deep into the month of March. So there's our first glance and our first look at Carolina earning that number 1 seed in the 2024 NCAA tournament. When we come back, we'll look at the decision for them to be the 1 seed, discuss how close it truly was for them, look at our number 2 seed, and talk about how much we approve of who Carolina's 2 seed is in the bracket, and also look around the bracket and compare our path to the other number 1 seeds to see which path is ultimately the toughest. But before we do any of that, we got to play you a quick word from one of our partners.
Hey there, Josh here for the Autograph Fandom app. Want to get rewarded for listening to our show? The team at Autograph, co-founded by Tom Brady, is redefining the fan experience by letting users earn points for the acts of fandom they take every day, like listening to this show. The Autograph Fandom app gives you access to your favorite UNC content in one place and offers rewards like tickets, exclusive merchandise, and much more. You're already listening to our show, but now you can earn points and get rewarded for it. Head over to the Apple App Store and search for Autograph Fandom Rewarded and download it today for free using the referral code HEELTOUGH. Link and code are also in our podcast description.
Welcome back inside the Four Corners podcast, guys. Hanging out on a Sunday night, a little over an hour and a half or so since the 2024 NCAA tournament bracket was unveiled. And as we're sitting here talking about it, Carolina, a number 1 seed for a record 18th time. So, buddy, we talked this morning when we were previewing Selection Sunday, and there was the conversation after Iowa State won the Big 12 tournament that they were going to be in conversation to be that 4th number 1 seed. You went as far to say that you thought that was going to be the case. I trusted in the committee and trusted in not wanting to set the precedent of them not playing anybody in November and December, and them not and then not being rewarded with a 1 seed. And that's exactly what happened. They were not a 1 seed. Carolina gets the final 1 line. Iowa State ultimately ends up the 2 seed in the East region, the number 8 overall seed, which means they're the lowest seeded 2 seed of all 4 2 seeds. And, during the selection show, with Tennessee being the 5, they had the conversation and the debate of did the committee get it right when you look at Carolina being a 1 over Tennessee. And, of course, we thought that it was correct. And, I thought the committee chairman did a good job explaining that, the way that they got blasted in their conference tournament is when in the last time you saw them play, played a role, played a factor. He did say, look, these 2 teams played one another. We saw that result. I think what Charles McClellan said tonight was, man, we looked at everything. It wasn't just analytics. It wasn't just the metrics. It was who you played, where you played, how you played, and ultimately that's why Carolina got that final 1 seed, because they scheduled tough in the non-conference. They performed well in the non-conference. That carried over into the conference season where they win their conference regular season title. And despite not winning their conference tournament, they still performed. They weren't a one and done like a Tennessee or a 2 and done like a Purdue. They made their conference tournament final, got beat by a team that was just hot and riding a wave of fate and destiny. And, ultimately, we don't say it often, but the committee got it right, giving Carolina the final number 1 seed.
Oh, there's no question about that. And I mean, the thing is them asking about why was Tennessee not the final number 1 seed? I mean, I don't even know how that's a question. Like, I don't, that team got smashed by a Mississippi State team that entering the week, people were questioning whether or not that team should have been in the field. And it happened in the quarterfinals. They lost their first game of their conference tournament. So to me, that conversation was wild. Like, I don't understand how they would even have been considering putting them as the final 1 seed. I will say, I was shocked by how the committee handled the Big 12. I thought, honestly, Oklahoma would be safely in the field from them. Now, do I think they deserve to be in the field? I don't even think they deserve to be in the field. I think they got it right. I think the way that team finished the season, no, that team didn't deserve to be in the tournament field. So I think they nailed it. But I really thought, and this is, again, what when you listen to the people around the sport talk, and especially these bracket experts, it's showing you that they're starting to get more and more disconnected from this committee, because they truly believed that the Big 12 would have more teams in, really that they would have Oklahoma in the field. There was a belief that the Big East would have a ton of teams in. Big East only had 3. Now, to me, I think there should have been more teams in. I think the experts were right that there should have been more in, but they only get 3 in. And the ACC was one of those conferences that they thought wasn't really going to get much respect. If NC State wouldn't have won last night, they would have gone into today saying that there would be 3 teams going into the field from the ACC. And instead, I mean, you saw, just around Carolina. I mean, look, Duke, debatable where they should have been at. The 4 line, I think a lot of people thought they would be on the 3 line. To me, it is odd that Kentucky gets the benefit of the doubt and Duke doesn't, but I'm not going to be crying tears for them, to say the least. But the other 2 teams, I mean, look, Virginia making the field. Granted, they have to go to Dayton, I think shows you that there's more respect for the ACC. And then the one to me that shows that there is a lot more respect for the ACC than a lot of people think is Clemson being a 6 seed, because that's a team that I thought would be probably on the 7 line, maybe even the 8 line, with the way that they, lost in the conference tournament to Boston College, a team that I didn't really think that they would have a lot of respect for. But that's the thing. They definitely showed that there was more respect for the ACC. And yes, McClellan made it a point when he talked with CBS and when he talked on ESPN that the way you schedule in the non-conference matters. This is not conference season is when college basketball starts, like many media members want it to be. This is you have to start your season strong, or else it can cost you when you get to March. And I mean, yeah, I think it shows that the fact that they were the final 2 seed, like, to me, I mean, the way they won, they should have been ahead of at least Marquette, especially with the uncertainty of Tyler Kolek. And they didn't even put them ahead of them. So really it was worrying about nothing, which I think is partially driven by the national college basketball media at this point, but is also driven by the fact that Carolina the last 4 or 5 years, things have not gone great. So there is a little bit of built-in paranoia from what's happened recently.
And now that brings us to what I think will be an interesting question to answer. Whenever we really started talking seeds, was about mid February is when that conversation heated up. When you got the bracket with Carolina, was an initial. They were a 2 seed when we got the 16-team bracket a little over a month ago, and we came on here and said, "Hey, I'd much rather be a 2 seed and play on the East Coast as opposed to be a 1 seed and go on the West Coast." But as we got closer and closer to the tournament, our tune changed and we reevaluated the situation and the landscape and said, "No, I think that number 1 seed looks a little bit more attractive, and let's just go ahead and do what we need to do to become a 1 seed." And Carolina did that. That win at Duke, I think, really, as long as they weren't one and done in their conference tournament, I think once they won at Duke, I do think that pushed them over the top. So now that we're sitting here as a 1 seed, are we happy with the result when you look at the way our bracket is laid out compared to the other 1 seeds in their brackets?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, and I got to be honest. Like with how much parity there is now, I don't really think anybody has that easy of a road. I think it's incredibly difficult for pretty much every team because it's so unpredictable. I mean, look, is it the easiest road that you're going to have? No. I mean, it really just depends on what ends up happening. I do think, they drew one of the tougher 8 seeds because I do think that Mississippi State is a team that is a lot better than their record would tell you. I think we saw that this week. They're a very competitive team on the defensive end of the floor as well. So Carolina's got to be prepared for that one. But I mean, look, Alabama is somewhat questionable. I mean, we'll get into it. We'll break it further down, when we talk tomorrow. But I mean, yeah, just on the surface, I mean, Alabama as your 4 seed, not terrible. Your 5 seed, St. Mary's, is, probably not the easiest matchup, but they don't have the easiest matchup in their first round game either. And I mean, look, the 3 seed. So I was really excited about the thought that we could get Kansas because I think that team is primed for the picking this year. And I saw a couple of different brackets that had Kansas as the 3 seed, but Baylor was that team that many were expecting. They're a weird. I honestly don't know how to feel about them. That's going to be one where I'm going to have to sit there and think when I fill up my bracket just how far I'm actually going to have them going because they have a lot of talent. And the one thing is that they've got really good guard play. So Carolina would have to be prepared with that. And then, of course, I mean, the 2 seed is the one. I mean, that's the talking point. And that's the one we're going to spend the most time talking about tomorrow is Arizona. A chance for there to be a matchup between the Tar Heels and Caleb Love for a chance to go to the Final Four. That's going to be, a pretty crazy storyline if we actually get to that. And then, you're on the same side of the bracket as UConn. But yeah, this is exactly what you wanted because you did not want to have to play UConn in the Elite 8 with a chance to go to the Final Four. You want to get to Phoenix. And then once you get to Phoenix, once you're playing in a stadium, it's going to be a matchup of 2 great programs, 2 teams that have been to the Final Four recently, one that's cut down the nets last season. And I think once you get to that point, just about anything can happen. We've seen it before. So ultimately, I like how it shaped up for Carolina.
Yeah, so do I. I didn't come away thinking, man, I think Carolina got the short end of the stick. I agree with you that Mississippi State as an 8 is scary. There's a lot of them in A&M in 2018 when Carolina went home in the second round to an SEC team in Charlotte. They're physical. Chris Jans is a quality head coach. Josh Hubbard's, set their school record for most threes in a season. And Tolo Smith down low, man, A, great name. B, he's just a beast of a man. So, but outside of that, man, I look around the brackets and I look at Carolina's draw, and look, no, it's not easy. There's too much parity in the sport, but I think if Carolina plays to their level, a lot of there's a lot that really tips the scales in their favor to play deep into the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
We knew Arizona was going to be the 2 based off of location and then the storyline. Baylor, a lot of that is, okay, these 2 teams played an epic final 2 years ago or an epic tournament game 2 years ago. It'd be kind of fun to see them match up again, in the second weekend of the tournament. So, but all in all, like there have been some years when I've gotten the bracket, I wished Carolina was a different seed in a different region. Not the case. I love the fact that Carolina is going to be playing close to home the first 2 weekends, or the first 2 games. They'll be well represented. That matters because when you're on a neutral court, if you can get some sort of a home court advantage, it goes a long way. And so Carolina will have that starting on Thursday. And so all in all, man, like I look at this and say, an hour and a half after getting the bracket, I like where Carolina is. I like our chances to do something special. And when you're sitting here after you get in the bracket, that's the only feeling you want to have is, man, I'm confident in my team. And I think my team is capable of doing some pretty special things. And for me, that's where I am. And I think this bracket, while challenging, does offer them that opportunity. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get out of here for this edition of the podcast. As I mentioned.
Well, by the way, really quickly before we get out of here, they did just we did get the time for the first game. Again, Carolina has to wait and find out if it'll be Howard or Wagner, but they are going to be the 2:45 game on Thursday. So they will play relatively early. I don't know if it'll start at 2:45. I believe that is the second game of the day that will be played there. So that means the first game will be the first game of the tournament will be played in Charlotte, and then Carolina will follow that. So it'll probably be somewhere around like 3:00 when Carolina will tip off against either Howard or Wagner, who will play on Tuesday night to figure out who Carolina will be playing.
All right, so there you go. Carolina will play Thursday, 2:45 p.m. That game will be, as we mentioned, for all you locals, get to the Spectrum Center. That game will be played in Charlotte, North Carolina, with Carolina looking to advance to the second round of the NCAA tournament. But with that, we are going to go ahead and get out of here. A shorter edition of the pod, as I mentioned. We'll be back tomorrow night. We'll further break down the West region of the 2024 NCAA tournament. Go a little bit more in depth on the teams that Carolina will have the chance to play on Thursday and the rest of the teams that fill out the bracket. In the meantime, we're going to encourage you, visit the website, HeelToughBlog.com, where we had you covered for Selection Sunday, including Carolina being a 1 seed. That article is up and posted for you guys. Some other news and notes are in there. So go check out that article. And, of course, we'll be getting you ready for Carolina's first-round matchup later in the week, along with spring football, which officially gets underway on Tuesday. It'll fly under the radar because it is the heart of the college basketball season, and Carolina's a 1 seed. But Anthony will have you covered with all the storylines as Mac Brown gets prepared to open up another spring camp in Chapel Hill. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform. Simply search the Four Corners Podcast, where we will pop up. There, we encourage you to rate, review, and subscribe. That way, you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the remainder of the season. Newsflash: this is our 8th recording in 4 days. We're recording virtually every day, left and right. You want to hit that subscribe button. That way, you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the remainder of the basketball season. Well, with that, that is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.